Throughout my life of playing TF2, I have grown increasingly more complacent with its design elements, rundown visuals, imperfections, and the lack of bright neon colors. And most importantly, clarity. If you take a look at TF2's concept art, the mercenaries, and the popular menu backdrops, you can tell that this game has developed its own unique visual style. Many people define TF2 as cartoony, pastel, or even goofy, but I beg to differ. There are many more things to TF2 than it just being cartoony and goofy. We have many games today that are also cartoony and goofy. The most popular ones are Valorant, Overwatch, and Fortnite, but comparing the visual style of these games to TF2 is more of an insult than anything. Because these games don't want to try to be any different. They just want to chase trends instead of settling them. I mean, sure, they set some trends, but not in a good way. They'd rather make corporate decisions than artistic ones. And you can make the argument, sure, they can look pretty, they can be fun and engaging, and that's the most important thing when you're creating a video game. But for me, these games and the outliers around them lack passion and soul, and all I can see from these games is the giant corporate greed behind them doing whatever they can to earn money. Doesn't matter in what way they do it, just as long as it happens. And when it comes to TF2, if you ignore the cancerous addition of loot boxes and the famous Monopoly game called Modern TF2 Trading, TF2 was created with passion, love and care from a company that is now a shell of what it was. And TF2 has always been my favorite first-person shooter. I shit talk it sometimes, and I sometimes, if not always, despise the community around it, mainly by those who couldn't care less about this game's origins, and those who just think about numbers and money. And after I released this video, I just wanted to walk away from everything, but I know that I can never truly break away from this game because I have a burning passion for it, because I care way too much.
And just as a funny story, so halfway through the development of Team Fortress, we brought in a bunch of core Team Fortress Classic players in a focus group. We gave them little memos. We printed this image up on the screen, pretty large. No titles, and they walked in and they knew what these characters were. 100% of them knew exactly what this game was, and 100% of them hated the design. So you can imagine these guys literally, it was like all these guys left the room upset, really upset, and we decided, fuck it. No, we know what we want to do. We're gonna just go open and try it.
Meet Moby Frankie. He's one of the reasons why TF2 looks the way it does today. Moby Frankie wanted to take the Team Fortress franchise and completely create a new style for it with the second installment, leaving behind the realistic shooter it was going for in the first place. And yes, this is a white boy essay video. I will be talking about this game's creation, and if you don't care about it, feel free to click off. But if you, as a viewer, truly care about this game and where it came from and how it was designed, I recommend you watch this video. It's a bit of a ramble, but I can link some timestamps in the description for each topic. Alright, let's get into it.
So then, in the world design, the goal was to create an immersive and believable world. Team distinction through materials such as wood and concrete and corrugated metals. We wanted an impressionistic, non-photorealistic, painterly look. So then again, it's to the research, and you're only as good as your research. So we looked at Jack Delano, who was a photographer from the 1930s, and he was actually experimenting with color photos. And
TF2 is obviously set in the 60s or early 70s, and this was inspired by Jack Delano's photography. His photographs were taken around the 40s America, displaying the harsh living conditions at the time, many of which showed the industrial side of things which the TF2 team was intrigued by. Not only did they want to incorporate this industrial feel to TF2, but they also wanted a bit of spy tech to add to the world building, because you are in a war after all. The team limited themselves to what you would think that would be available at the time, but they stretched it a tiny bit, for it to allow things like medic supercharge, engineers buildings, and spies gadgets. If you take a look at a sketch that I found from one of James Bond movies, you can see where they took the inspiration from, ranging from the databases, the angular support structure, the fence gates and catwalks. You see more of this the further you push into the base of the enemy teams, like on Gorge, Hardwood, Steel, Hydro, Well, Two Fort, Cold Front, Mountain Lab, and so many more. All of this meshes well together to bring in a few environmental changes into the otherwise lackluster rundown 60s landscape. Not to say that this game would die without it, but a bit of subtle world building doesn't really hurt anyone.
So once we get the proof of concept, right, this was after about a year of development when we first started. All of the models are textured, everything is inside of the game and we run around. Some of the other programmers were not so enthusiastic because they were used to seeing, realistic stuff. And they were like, I don't understand why the wood it's not wood. And we're like, no, it's hand painted, Anyways, we ended up going for it. So I just want to go do a before and after.
If you look at TF2's textures, some people can easily say that it looks painterly, rundown, simple, hand-drawn, and that's for a good reason. Moby Frankie was inspired by Hayao Miyazaki's movies, mainly Spirited Away. At the beginning of this film, you can see that the clock tower and the gateway share similarities with TF2 textures. They all have this painterly style and rundown elements to it. And if you put TF2 concept art or textures next to these, you can see that they share similarities, but it's been simplified, put back in the industrial 60s, and have a toned down saturation to give it that drab industrial feel. The reason why these textures have aged so well is because they look hand-painted instead of being photorealistic. They were designed with simplicity in mind. They are smooth and eye-pleasing, and they look good from every angle because of their simplistic, flat intent.
The textures of Hayao Miyazaki were fantastic in the sense that they held up frame to frame and at any angle in the game. And Jeff Ballinger took full liberty to make that happen.
That's why some war paints like these looks absolute dog shit, because the creators never thought about the game they were making the skin for. When I started making war paints, the trial and error I had to endure to somewhat recreate these painterly textures was incredibly fun and rewarding, because you can slap it onto any weapon model and it magically fits, because it blends in with the rest of the game as it should. The ability to learn and understand the reasonings why textures look the way they do was very fun and fascinating to me, and one hell of a learning experience. And it made me appreciate the style TF2 has settled for a lot more than I previously ever had.
Characters are the most important piece of art in a multiplayer game, so that is where we spent most of our effort. We developed a read hierarchy for player models, prioritizing the information that players needed to be able to read merely by looking at the model. Our hierarchy was this: first, what team they're on, second, what class they're playing, and third, what weapon they're wielding. Team readability was addressed by adopting an overall color palette for each team, picking warm colors for red and cool colors for blue. Class readability was addressed with the character's silhouette. Unique silhouette and animation shapes are more identifiable at far distances, and across a broader range of light levels than any amount of other visual detail on the model. Finally, the weapon was highlighted through the textures. The areas of highest contrast, which attract players' eyes, are all focused around the chest area of our character models, right where they hold the weapon. In addition, the subtle gradient from darkness around the character's feet to the bright areas around the chest also helps draw the player's eyes to the weapons.
During the making of TF2, the developers had a really big eye on making every class feel unique, not only in their gameplay but also in their design. They wanted you to spot classes and which team they were on at just a glance, but when it came to the design choices of the mercenaries, they took inspiration from CGI movies that were coming out at the time, like for example, The Incredibles. I mean, if you look at the Heavy and you compare him to Mr. Incredible, you can tell that there are some similarities. The ability to exaggerate body proportions was really important, because that meant that they could design 9 mercenaries to make them all look different just by their silhouette alone. And then you add the posture, animations, team colors, and their guns, that are massive too for this reason, by the way. And now you can easily identify what class this is within a split second, without even thinking about it.
But yeah, it's like you work in grayscale, you figure out your compositions, your read hierarchy, right? The primary, secondary, and tertiary reads, silhouetting of characters, gradations of darks to lights and areas of contrast. And then there's animation involved, right? There's all these different things. You know, people will see a concept of a character and they're like, you know, we need more detail. I'm like, or let's do a mock-up right? Let's rough shell that character into the game, and let's do an animation, right? And you see that character run around, and you'll never see those details because it becomes an impression. All that detail stuff is not really important, right? Getting the impression of the detail is important. When you see that, you know, it's a form of pain when you see all the little noodly bits of something, rather than like a clear silhouette that's intentional and easy for you to figure out, right? And that's why I always say, you know, by definition, clarity is the quality of being easily understood, right? Without ambiguity.
To further back up these claims, Charlie Brown, a former game designer of TF2, implies, and I quote, "The specific characteristics we needed to capture were mostly dictated by Team Fortress 2's gameplay. Foremost, we wanted players to be able to intuit each character's unique gameplay features at just a glance. The heavy weapons character, for example, had to quickly convey strength, sturdiness, and slowness, and the ability to pack a real wallop. To further aid in quick readability, each character class required a bold, distinct silhouette shape." Readability is the key word here, by the way, and holy shit did they knock it out of the park with that. I don't think many people realize or understand how important this aspect of the game is, nor do people seem to care about it either. Because we process the silhouette of these classes in an instant, we don't even need to think about it, we're that spoiled. Same goes for team colors. I could also go in depth about that, but Jesus already made a video about that and he pretty much says everything that needs to be said, but I will put it simply. The colors on the merc's clothes are the brightest colors you will see in normal gameplay, next to objectives and crits. But the developers made sure you could easily identify a teammate or an enemy with contrasting colors and bright team colors to grab the eye's attention. Believe it or not, the human eye looks for the brightest color or object right in front of you at all times. That's why it's so easy to spot players around the map, and why some games utilize a light to point you in the right direction, without making it too obvious. Valve is obviously not the first one to use these techniques, but they sure as hell set a good example of how to use them and how much they contribute to gameplay. Because in a game where you quickly need to identify what class someone's playing, what team they're on, is fundamental in a team class based first person shooter. And it cannot be cluttered up with details or huge paint regions, or sometimes be outright removed. And don't take it from me, take it from the team themselves that made it pretty much clear on what their intentions are. All of their work helped to contribute to the fast-paced gameplay that we have today, that we're spoiled by, and it should not go unnoticed. What I also find really interesting is the map design and the buildings as well as the geometry in this game. Maybe not on a map like Woodville, but Two Forts is a really good example. So what the designers had in mind when it came to maps was to utilize colors, materials and geometry to help players differentiate team properties. If you take a look at the red team, most of geometry is angular, and because it's a red team, it obviously has to be red. But to help with that, the developers chose to go with a handful of materials that would complement that color choice, like for example wood, rusted metal sheets, and warmer painterly colors overall. The blue team has a lot of orthogonal or square-like buildings, and they utilize industrial materials such as metal and concrete to present these cooler colors that represent the blue team. And without any color, you can still identify which team is which just by looking at the architecture alone. And they managed to execute this perfectly by making it feel natural and subtle. However, in the general aspect of everything, all buildings in this game follow a simple rule, and that's the fact that it was built by hand, and not by large corporations that we have today. They haven't suffered from the Bauhaus modernization of things, where everything is modernized, flat, plain, non-cluttered, geometric, and has symmetrical forms. Due to this being set in the late 60s and out on the countryside, away from everything, as Moby puts it, there are bound to be imperfections and asymmetrical shapes. Every building in this game has some sort of utility in everyday life, like storages, small sheds, shelves, offices, and garages. The sign of human imperfections is also a breath of fresh air compared to modern games that we have today. Because in TF2 TF2 you see a lot of them. The fences, the paintbrushes on the wall, the structures, the advertisements, the obstacles. It breathes life into this world that is essentially a painting of the past not too far gone. And sadly we don't really see much of this anymore with newer maps, and also because of the introduction of payload. Not to say that this design philosophy is completely gone. Some newly added attack-defend maps adopt this idea, but these are the exceptions and not the norm. The majority of maps that we get nowadays feel off or try to do too much to stand out, which is nice for a change, but they fail to capture this feeling of TF2. And it certainly feels like Smithmas and Scream Fortress maps have no signage of stopping as well. It's coming to the point where all of them have to adopt a new atmosphere to feel different. Maybe this is a sign to stop adding maps, because it's getting to the point where they don't feel like TF2 anymore. I don't know about you, but I don't think we need 10 maps for every single update. I'll talk more about this later on.
Look about, the fact that we have, 300 characters in this game, or whatever, or 15 or 25, whatever, right? And they all have to be orchestrated perfectly with the environment, with their weapons, right? With the HUD, all those things. And of course, like the game design itself, like that all has to be perfectly mechanized to work together. And if you don't do that, you're gonna stutter things. It's not gonna be clear.
Clarity. This is the most important bit that the developers had to strive for when it came to the development of this game. Especially with Moby Frankie and his views on art. Everything that I've mentioned before all of this have connections to this word. Adopting this idea of a simple pastel painterly texture design and being set in the industrial 60s for a more round-down earthly look is genius, because the mercenaries, with their bright team colors, stick out the most.
Analyzing this one screenshot, you can see that the heavy is popping from the analogous red desaturated background. And then the red characters are much more saturated than the world, right? That's all intentional. That's so that the clarity can really be seen, because characters need to be seen in a variety of different lighting conditions, distances, and viewpoints.
The addition of different geometry designs in combination with colors and materials helps to give each team's properties a distinct look. It is a small touch, but it does so much for team-based recognition and environmental awareness. It's these small details that makes me love this game so much. And the ability to read and process what's going on in front of you is what contributes to TF2's fast-paced gameplay and why it feels so smooth and enjoyable. And it's the reason why I've dumped thousands of hours into the game. A literal year of my life, it's sad to think about, but I'm not the only one with these hours. When I play other games that have PvP, the reliability isn't just there. I see other games suffer from the same issue. They all rely on red colored names and outlines for you to realize that it's an enemy. And for me, that is just boring, lazy, and annoying to rely on a game to tell me who's an enemy and who's not. And in certain situations, sometimes the game is just way too cluttered, so good luck trying to spot a figure on your screen with all the visual clutter.
Zone B captured. You have zone advantage.
Some games like Overwatch and Valorant have aimed for a more eye-pleasing visual style by making the textures clean, but then they undo all of that, and the amount of visual elements in your HUD takes place instead. So in massive team fights, the HUD becomes a real problem. The game expects you to realize what's going on in combination with fast gameplay. Experienced players may say that this information is very critical, or you can just flat out ignore it. But wouldn't it be easier if the text in the middle of the fucking screen wasn't there at all? Wouldn't it be easier if the HUDs were simpler and restrict these elements to only critical moments during gameplay? TF2 uses these visual cues, but sparingly. Only when you're set on fire, under effects of bleed, Jarate, drowning, and under effects of a Uber charge. Minimal visual cues are when you're under effects of mini crits, doused in mad milk, speed and slowness attributes. TF2 can get away with most of these things, because they actually try to minimize the visual clutter on the screen. And most of these aren't even in your face either, unlike how they are in some other games. But out of all of these games, Destiny 2 takes the fucking cake. What the fuck is going on the screen? You probably don't know, neither do I. I'm the fucking guy playing this shit. So yeah, to summarize the video, yes, I love this game. Is it perfect? No.
How the fuck? Och så går han bara iväg.
Okay, that dude is gone.
Kunai! But sure as hell sets a good standard for what first-person shooters today should probably take notice of. And sadly, this game could never be recreated today because of modern live service principles. Battle passes, terrible UI, intrusive and god-awful microtransactions, and agonizingly bad writing.
I'll lead the way, even though I'm totally unarmed. Can't let them know you're afraid and totally defenseless, bro. Bandit life!
Oh my fucking god. And it certainly feels like some people in the TF2 community who say that they quote-unquote love this game. Obviously, you can love what you do and what you play, but there's a difference between loving a game and then caring for it. Sure, it's a stupid video game, but it's a hobby for me and for everyone else. And if you compare TF2 to how it was back in 2012 to 15 to now, it's a shell of how it was. 30 new unusual effects, 10 to 12 maps, on top of hats, taunts and warpaints. Within every seasonal update, it's getting harder and harder to keep track of things. It's becoming a chore in of itself to play all of the new maps when there are just so many of them. It's an illusion of content, and a lackluster one of that, because most of the new maps are terrible, and Scream Fortress never fails to break away from that trend. Same goes for the cosmetics and unusuals. Back in the day, we used to get 2 to 4 maps for each major update. Those maps were usually play tested and were of quality, and it was on top of the content that was the update in of itself, and not the fake carcass that we have today. And saying that cosmetics like these, or outrageously bad and bare bones V-script game modes like these, are quote-unquote okay, or quote-unquote it's not a big deal, just tells me that you don't care. You just want new toys, and that's all you fucking care about, and I think that's really sad. Because in return, you dilute this piece of media that was once crafted by a company that had passion to create a fun, iconic shooter that's both fun for newbies and veterans alike. Adding in new wacky V-script game modes won't kill the game, sure. But I'm gonna be blunt with you, but nobody launches TF2 to fucking play those. Ever since Valve left, people have just been coming back to TF2 to just play TF2. And Valve themselves are now a company that just wants to lean away from the public as much as possible. They just want to focus on their products instead of maintaining their games to the bare minimum. Because what a coincidence, after 7 years we got a bot fix, after a month or 2 when Deadlock got leaked. Do you really think that they fixed the bots because they had our best interests at heart? Or do you think they fixed it so they could shut us up so they don't get negative press from the media? CS2, one of their biggest moneymakers, has a massive cheating problem that does not seem to be fixed anytime soon, because they'd rather focus on delivering irrelevant patch notes instead of fixing the problem that should have been solved before the game's initial re-release.
There's another tweet from Neymar. He says, play a little game to relax, CS2 help us, and @ CS and Valve and #hack. He basically jumps down suicide, runs out, and his whole team gets aimbotted. Look. You see? And his whole team just insta, you see wallbang heads, like obviously way cheating. Caralho. #hack.
It is fucking hilarious that a company that makes more money than entire countries cannot re-release a functioning game at a playable state and maintain one of their games at a bare minimum. But hey, you can still open cases, so I mean, who really cares? I just want people to have some standards, and I want people to show at least some respect to this game and what it has given us for the past 18 years of its initial release. Because we will never, ever see a game like this ever again, and I want to preserve it for how it is, and I hope some of you guys will agree with me on that. In any case, thank you all so much for listening or watching, and I hope you learned something. Hope it was entertaining, and I hope I didn't make anyone mad, because that wasn't my intention, but if I did, I guess I'm sorry. Bye-bye.
Come on, tough guy!
Yes.
There's no Coca-Cola drink in there.
No hesitation. No hesitation, just kill it.
Ooh, it's been a while, hasn't it? I Words don't begin to describe the production hell I've been through with this video, ranging from script refining, puzzling each piece together during editing, recording and re-recording voiceovers because of script changes, either because they didn't come out well or I had to change something about them. And then there's complete script overhauls, because in the beginning I wanted to touch on TF2's game design as a whole, but that is another video for another day, and I won't be making that one for a while. It depends if people would like to see that, or if this video does well or whatever, I don't know. And then there's my angst with fixed TF2 and how all of that turned out. I was just pissed that nobody wanted to spread the word to boycott this game. It felt like it was just me and some other people in the community spreading the word, and the idea of a boycott was tossed around to people, but it was just completely ignored for some reason, and that frustrated the hell out of me. It really did. But hey, the bots are gone. You know, they fixed it. We achieved our goal. So we should enjoy this moment as much as we can, but there's still much left to fix, and I will come around to that in some point in the future. Anyhow, that situation just gave me extreme brain fog, and it gave me brain fog when I made that piece of shit video, and it still lasted till the making of this video. But with some help from my friends, I got around to completing it. And I was just done with YouTube and such, but I realized during my time not editing, I just missed it more and more. I realized that this was just a hobby for me, and not work, and I shouldn't treat it as such. If you haven't noticed, during my entire time talking, there is a long list of names just scrolling down, and those are my patrons, all of them, including those who have cancelled their memberships, because they still deserve praise and recognition, because they are the reason as of why I'm here today. So thanks to all of them. My next video is gonna be a clip dump. I just wanna return to this. I have clips that are before the summer event, probably months before that as well. And the Best of Monkey 2024 will be pushed towards the end of this year, because I feel like it just makes more sense instead of releasing it in the middle of summer. The reason why I released it in the middle of summer was because my channel really popped off during June or July, around there. And if you're still listening to me ramble, thank you for being here, and I cannot wait to release the next clip dump, and I hope to see you there. I hope you have a good one, and hej då.